Welcome everyone to the Oundle Festival of Literature's Kidlit Week, and welcome to World Book Day. I hope you've got lots of exciting things planned at school today. It's very exciting to be able to bring you these events by Zoom webinar. We have 5 local schools watching today, so I'd just like to say a quick hello to all of you and picture you all waving back at me. So first of all, hello to Warmington Primary. Hello to Cocktail School. Welcome to Titchmarsh Primary. Welcome to Laxton Junior School. And lastly, good morning to Oundle Primary. Right, joining us today is a fantastic author-illustrator called David O'Connell. Sometimes David draws pictures for other authors, such as in the Naughtiest Unicorn series with Pip Burbed. And in other books, like the Dundoodle Mysteries, he writes the words and another person does the illustrations, in this case, Claire Powell. But David has also written the Monster and Chip series, and with these books, he drew the pictures and wrote the words, which shows just how amazing he is. Please welcome David to Oundle. Good morning, David.
Good morning and happy World Book Day, everybody.
Right, I'll leave you to it, David.
Thank you. Yes, happy World Book Day, everyone. I almost said Happy New Year then. I think my brain is still stuck in January. I know some of you are at home and I know some of you are at school. And I wonder how many of you are actually in your World Book Day costumes. Or maybe some of you are in your pajamas. I don't know. I'm not going to judge, don't worry. But if any parents or teachers would like to share your World Book Day costumes, I'm on Twitter. This is my Twitter name here. You can find me there. So if you want to share any costumes or if you want to share any drawings, because we're going to be doing a bit of drawing later on, or if you just want to say hello and ask questions about books or anything you like, you can find me there. Right, so World Book Day, I'm spending my World Book Day at home, probably maybe like you are. I live in Brighton, which is down on the south coast, and I live by the sea. This is where I work. This is my little office space, where I do my drawings and I do my writing. And just over here, there's a window where sometimes this great big seagull, who I've named Stephen Seagull, he comes and sits there and he screeches through the glass at me. So I'm just letting you know, if you hear someone, if it sounds like someone's being murdered in the background, don't worry, it's just Stephen making a noise. So I just thought I'll warn you just in case. Anyway, I shouldn't be talking about seagulls. I shouldn't be talking about that. I should be talking about books. So as Helen said, I'm a writer and an illustrator. So that means I kind of have 2 jobs in the book world. I either write the words or I draw the pictures. So what I'm going to talk about, first of all, is I'm going to talk about some of the different books that I've worked on. So you can see the kind of range of things I get to do. Because the nice thing about being an illustrator is I don't just get to illustrate my own books, I get to illustrate other people's books. So sometimes I'm illustrating things that I wouldn't necessarily choose to do. Whereas when I'm writing, I tend to write about things that only I'm interested in. But when I'm drawing, I draw all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to show you some of the books and then talk a bit more about the Chocolate Factory Ghost. And I'm glad we're talking about that because that is actually, I think, my favorite book. It's the one I've enjoyed creating the most. And then after that, I'm going to talk about ideas, because that's the one thing I get asked about all the time, is where do you get your ideas from? So we're going to talk about how to get ideas, what to do with those ideas. And then I'm going to show you a way, if you're not very good at creating ideas or thinking up ideas, I'm going to show you a sort of like a word game that we can use to create a character. And that's where the drawing comes in. So if you have a bit of paper and a pencil nearby, if you want to take part, you don't have to, it's just a bit of fun. But if you want to do some drawing, then that's the time to do it. And then once we've created a character, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that character and make a story around them. And I'm going to do that by making a comic, because I love comics. Comics are a great way of telling a story. And the idea behind that is to show you that you can take one very simple idea just from a couple of words and make something much bigger and much more complicated about it. That's the plan. Anyway, let's see how it all goes. So I'm going to talk about some books first of all. First one from my bucket of books just here This is a picture book, so this is for slightly younger readers, and this is called Jampires. And I created this with a lady called Sarah McIntyre, who she may have come to your school in the past. I don't know. I mean, you know if she had. She's a very tall lady, a very pretty lady with big glasses, and she has enormous hats, so you can't miss her. You would know if you met Sarah McIntyre. So we created this picture book together, and it's about these characters called Jampires. They are like vampires, but instead of sucking the blood out of people, they suck the jam out of donuts, and they love all sweet things. They'll just eat any sweet things. And this is a bit of an unusual one because Sarah and I, we wrote it together, and we actually drew it together as well. That's really unusual. That doesn't happen very often. So some of the pictures I drew bits of, some of the writing Sarah did bits of, and the other way around. It's all a bit of a mix-up, and it's quite difficult for me now to look back on it and remember who did what. I'm just trying to find a nice picture to show you. This is a good one. This is a picture of the Jampire land. So they live up in the clouds, where all the mountains and all the countryside is made of food and sweets. And there's this great big giant jam jar, and they kind of buzz around it like bees. So that's the Jampires. So that's one way of creating a story. So this is a proper collaboration where we both work together quite closely, and it was a lot of fun to do. It was quite hard work, but it was a lot of fun to do. So that's one way of working. The next book I'm going to show you. Okay, so this is a book that I did the illustrations for, but I didn't write. It's written by a lady called Pip Bird, and it's The Naughtiest Unicorn. And this is about a unicorn called Dave. Now, most unicorns are really kind of very pretty and glamorous, and they're all sparkly, and there are rainbows everywhere. And Dave's not like that at all. Dave's a little bit round. He likes to eat, he likes to sleep, and he likes to fart at the wrong moment. So he's a bit of a naughty unicorn, and he's a bit grumpy too. But his best friend, Myra, she absolutely adores him, and she kind of realizes that underneath it all, he's actually quite a nice unicorn. He's quite soft center. There's quite a soft center to him. So that's a whole series of very funny books. I'm just at the moment doing illustrations for book 8 in this series, and there's another book I've got to start immediately after that. So 9 books in all. So that's a lot of unicorns. If you're not into drawing unicorns, that's a lot of unicorns. This has been a lot of fun to do. So that's a nice example of something. And I wouldn't really want to draw unicorns. They're not really my thing. But this is kind of forced me to do it, and I've really enjoyed it as well. So it's good to sort of step out of your comfort zone and do things that you're not necessarily so keen on. So this has been a lot of fun to do. The Naughtiest Unicorn. Next on my list, what have I got here? Oh yes, Monster and Chips. So this is a book that I wrote and I did the illustrations for as well. So this is all me, this book. It's about a boy called Joe who he goes down an alleyway and through a kind of magical door, and he discovers a cafe, kind of like a fish and chip shop maybe, or one of those places that does all day breakfasts and where everything is served with chips. He wanders in there and he discovers that it's owned by a monster, this big green monster called Fuzzby, and he basically gives Joe a job in his diner, and Joe gets to meet all the other monsters that come there, because it's just a cafe for monsters to go and hang out, and when they're not being scary and horrible, they can just meet their friends and have a nice meal. So he gets to meet those monsters, and he gets to have go on all the adventures with Fuzzby. So this was kind of, everything was all about me in this book. So I got to write what I wanted to write, and I got to draw what I wanted to draw. So for example, let's find a good picture. There's a picture of an exploding milkshake. The milkshake's made out of fish eggs. And there's also, this is a lot of fun to do. There you go, found it. Zombie cupcakes. So there are millions of little cupcakes come to life, and they all want to eat your brains. So I really went to town with this book. I just did whatever I wanted with this book. It was a lot of fun to do. And it was my first book as well, so I kind of got a bit of a soft spot for it too. Now, next I'm going to show, just to show you as an illustrator, as I was saying before, you kind of get to do things that are really quite different from what you might want to do or you might expect to do. So this is a non-fiction book, so it's like a textbook at school. You get it at school, so it's not a storybook. It's full of facts and figures. And really, the real reason I'm showing this is because I like to show off about the fact that it's written by Dr. Ranj, who you might know from the TV. And I got to draw some pictures for a celebrity, so I kind of like to show off about that. So that's why I'm showing you this. This came out a couple of weeks ago, actually, so it's brand new. Right. So finally, The Chocolate Factory Ghost. So this is my favorite book. I got to put loads and loads of ideas into this. It's almost like a few books kind of squished together. I'll talk about that in a minute. It's about a boy. Actually, I've got a bigger picture here of the cover. Just get that. Around. It's about a boy called Archie McBudge. This is him here. And he inherits a big old mansion, which you can see in the background of that picture, from his great uncle Archibald. This is great uncle Archibald. But Uncle Archibald he's died, but he's still kind of around because he's a ghost and he's still haunting the house. He lives inside a big painting that hangs in the fireplace of the library. And so the painting kind of comes to life. And Archie and his two friends, this is Billy here, and this is Fliss in the middle. They kind of set out to solve a challenge that Uncle Archibald has set Archie. Archie needs to prove himself worthy of being in charge of this big house and being in charge of the chocolate factory that is inherited and the whole business. So great uncle Archibald sets in this challenge. It's like a treasure hunt, really. He has to find all these clues, and these clues lead on to finding a treasure. And it's all a mystery and a bit of an adventure, and there's magic and chocolate and all kinds of stuff in. I'll talk about that a bit more. So you may have already read this, I'm not sure, but if you haven't, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a bit from the book. So if you've read the book already, you'll know this already. But if you haven't, this will give you a kind of a taster as to what the book's about. So this is at the beginning, and Archie has just found out that he's inherited a chocolate factory. He's gone with his mum to Honeystone Hall, this big old rambling spooky house. And the lawyer there, Mr. Tatters, has informed Archie that his late uncle has left him all this money and all this house and this factory. It's all a dream come true, really. Right, that's right. Reading voice and switched on. There's one more thing, said Mr. Tatters, the lawyer, reaching into his jacket pocket. Your great uncle left you this letter. He handed Archie a crumpled envelope. A surprisingly steady hand. Great Uncle Archibald looked ancient in the painting, had written on it in thick caramel brown ink. To the heir of the chief of the Clan McBudge. The heir, said Mr. Tatters, catching Archie's puzzled look. That would be you. Old Mr. McBudge intended for you to read this in private. Why don't you go and explore whilst your mother and I discuss the legal paperwork and whatnot? I'm sure you'll find plenty of quiet spots in the house to read. Archie was being dismissed. The grown-ups had grown-up things to talk about. So with a nod from Mum, Archie ran out of the library, clutching the mysterious letter. His head was spinning. He was rich, and Honeystone Hall belonged to him and nobody else, except maybe the ghost of his great uncle. What had been going on with that weird painting? He pushed it out of his mind. There were plenty of other things to think about. Great things. It would take him a week just to explore the house, never mind the gardens and the factory. Archie wandered along a passageway, pondering which of the doors to try first. Everything, furniture, pictures, wallpaper, looked very old and was covered in a ghostly layer of dust. The stillness was deathly. Plenty of quiet spots, Mr. Tatters had said. Spots? This was practically measles. He tried one door. It was a cupboard filled with moth-speckled coats. Another door revealed an old-fashioned laundry room with sinks and mangles and drying rails. So far, so disappointing. Yet there was something else. In each room, Archie could feel a presence, like someone or something had just left moments before. He shivered. Finally, he chose a large green door with a dark metal handle. With a satisfying clunk, it opened and light poured into the shadowy passage. He took a step backwards as he was struck by the heat and smell of earth. Ferns, palm trees, vines, and orchids lay before him, bathed in a balmy mist and occupied with the business of growing and flowering and generally being alive and leafy. Had he stumbled into a different world, transported to a desert island? He half expected a dinosaur to lumber into view. It's a giant greenhouse, he said aloud. I'm just going to stop and show you. This is a picture that Claire Powell, the illustrator, did. She did a really great job of all the plants and yet keeping it a bit spooky too. The glass roof was as high as the hall itself. The warmth, light, and life were a marked contrast to the rest of the house and the dreary world outside it. But it had the same watchfulness about it. Something hidden had its eye on him. Archie followed a path amongst the plants and perched on a twisted tree root that had pushed its way up through the tiled floor. He opened the envelope and pulled out a crisp piece of paper covered with the same caramel-covered writing. Dear Archie, Mr. Tatters must have told you by now that you are my heir as chief of the Clan MacBudge, as well as heir to the MacBudge Fudge fortune. I have no doubt that this will have come as a surprise to you. Knowing you would inherit one day, but wanting you to have a normal life for as long as possible, your father kept his family connections a secret. Oh, so Dad knew all along, Archie smiled. Dad loves secrets. Oh, he wished Dad was here now. Your father, the letter said, was a clever man. Having lots of money can do strange things to people, and the desire for money can make people go bad, very bad. You must always remember this. But who better to run a chocolate factory than a child? Children understand fudge and sweets and chocolate far better than grown-ups. However, it is a great responsibility. You must prove you are worthy of your inheritance, worthy of the name MacBudge. So I have set you a test in the form of a treasure hunt to see just how canny you are. There are 6 items you must collect and 6 clues to find them. Once you have them all, a greater 7th treasure awaits you. But keep it secret. Others will go at any length to get it first. Others? What did that mean? The first clue will appear very soon. Keep your eyes open and your taste buds ready. You may find help in the strangest ways. Dundoodle is an odd place. Expect the unexpected. Good luck. Your great uncle, Archibald MacBudge. Archie realized he'd been holding his breath. His heart was beating fast. A test? A treasure hunt? P.S., the letter said, look behind you. If you ask me, said a voice just behind his ear, you're in a whole lot of trouble, Archie MacBudge. Archie jumped up from his perch and spun around. There was a girl hanging upside down from a thick vine that clung to the wall. Her grubby face glistened in the heat and gave him a cheeky upside-down smile. A spanner twirled confidently between her fingers. Who are you? Said Archie, annoyed. The girl unhooked her feet from the vine and let herself gently down to the ground. I'm Felicity Fairburn, said the girl, still smiling. Fliss, for short. Well, I'm the MacBudge heir, said Archie. I own this place. He liked the sound of that. But Fliss did not seem to be impressed. I know, she said, I read your letter. What do you think the treasure is? It's very rude to read over people's shoulders, snapped Archie. Well, so much for keeping things secret. It's also very difficult when you're topsy-turvy, said Fliss. Anyway, it's your fault for sitting right underneath where I was working. She pointed up to a moss-covered pipe threaded through the vine. There was a leaky pipe. I was fixing it. Otherwise, all old Mr. McBudge's tropical plants, sorry, all your tropical plants, Mr. McBudge, wouldn't have been heated properly and they would have died. There's no need to thank me or anything. Thank you, said Archie through gritted teeth. What did you mean when you said I was in trouble? You'll never pass this test, this treasure hunt task quest thing or whatever it is, said Fliss scornfully. You don't deserve to. How is it right that you get to have all this? She waved her spanner around at the plants, the greenhouse and the hall, when you don't know anything about this place. I've lived in Dundoodle my whole life, and my family have always worked in the McBudge factory. I know it like the back of my hand. But you're just a stranger here and don't even care about any of that. You've just turned up out of the blue and now it's all yours. It's not fair. She folded her arms emphatically and gave a sniff. Archie didn't have an answer. It wasn't fair, really. I can't help it, he said finally. Great Uncle Archibald left it all to me. He didn't have to, I suppose. He could have left it to a home for bald, toothless donkeys called Clive if he wanted to. It's probably complicated. Well, that's why I like machines, said Fliss, slapping the spanner into her palm. I'm going to be an engineer when I'm older. I know all about the machines in the factory. They're nice and simple. If they're broken, you can fix them. Or you can just smash them with a hammer. Well, I'm going to fix this, said Archie. I want to pass this test, and I will. I'll prove I'm a proper McBudge and show everyone that I do care. For some reason, the idea of great things had grown on him. What was Archie McBudge really capable of? Fliss's frown softened. You sounded a bit like your great uncle then, she said, rubbing her dirty nose on her sleeve. Completely bonkers. You're so obviously going to need my help. Now, where shall we start? Archie sighed. This girl was not going to leave him alone. Can I trust you to keep this a secret? He said. Of course, said Fliss, but you should probably eat that letter if you want to be really sure. What? Said Archie, looking at the wrinkled paper. Old Mr. McBudge used to write on rice paper with chocolate ink. You can eat it. You could eat all his letters. I told you, bonkers. Archie sniffed the paper. It did smell good. He cautiously went to take a bite. The letter scrunched up in recoil and flew out of his hand and onto the floor. Did you see that? He said. The letter's alive. And that's just the start of all the weirdness that happens in Dundoodle. It's a very strange town. There are two other books in this series as well. It's all about Archie and his friends. Right, so what I was going to do, as I said, there are loads of ideas that went into this book. And I've tried to sort of make a diagram out of it here. These are all the things I kind of wanted to write about, all the things that kind of really interested me. So obviously sweets and ghosts, it wouldn't be the Chocolate Factory Ghost without it. But there's a similar kind of thing with the Jampires picture book I showed you earlier. It's really nice to write about tasty food like chocolate or sweets. I like to write stories where you kind of come out of it feeling a bit hungry afterwards. Ghosts, I love spooky stories, I really do. Chocolate Factory Ghost isn't too spooky because it's a bit funny as well, so it's not too scary. But I love a bit of a scare. Scotland, I put Scotland up there. The story is set in Scotland, and that's because when I was a kid, my dad, he's a very keen mountaineer and rock climber, and he used to drag us all over the place, up and down mountains and very kind of dangerous places. Now I think about it, but we went to Scotland quite a lot. And it's such an amazing place if you've never been there. It's got beautiful countryside, very spectacular countryside, but it's also, this countryside is very close to cities. So you've got that kind of thing where you can be one moment you're in the middle of a city, the next minute you're out in the mountains and the forests. It's amazing. I grew up in London, and it takes a long time to get out of London and actually get to some proper countryside. So I think Scotland is a really good place to set a story. That's very important. We'll talk about that a bit later on as well, about setting stories. Where do you put them? Dragons, I love dragons. There are dragons in this, lots of dragons. Christmas, I've got here. Christmas stories are always nice. They give a bit of an atmosphere, but some snow on the ground, that kind of thing. Presents and nice food again. So it's nice to write about Christmas. Always wanted to write about a castle with secret passages and dungeons and crumbling towers and that kind of thing. Clues. The story is a mystery. I wanted to have proper clues and puzzles that needed solving. So I had to come up with all these ideas for clues, which is quite complicated to do. And all the clues in the Chocolate Factory Ghost, they're all made out of sweets as well. So kind of once you solve the clue, you can eat it afterwards. And that was quite tricky to try and think of sweets that could be used in clue making. Magic, there's tons of magic in this book as well. So there's lots of different things went into it. I've put a cross here by the sea because what I wanted originally, I wanted the story to be set by the sea, but there was so much going on, I couldn't really kind of fit in the sea. So I left that out, and I put it later. I kept that idea and used it later on in one of the later books. They go and visit the seaside. And that kind of brings me on to this, talking about ideas. What do you do with them when you have them? Do you necessarily need to use them, or sometimes you need to save them? And if you're going to save them, what do you do with them? And that's when people tend to use things like sketchbooks or notebooks or ideas books. You can call them what you like. Basically, it's a blank book, and you use it as a store for all your ideas. Because if you're like me, your head is just too leaky to keep all this stuff in. You just can't remember it. And also, I find I have ideas at really strange times. Like often, I have an idea for a story just as I'm going to bed and almost falling asleep. So what I tend to do is have a little notebook or a pad of paper by my bedside so I can just quickly write that idea down before I drop off. So more about these kind of notebooks or scrapbooks or ideas books, things you can put in them. So maybe, for example, you've got an idea for the start of a story, but you don't know how it's going to end. So you put the start of your story in your scrapbook, and you can come back to it some later time. It's always going to be there. And maybe you've thought of the end of the story and you haven't thought about the beginning. So you can just use it as a sort of temporary place to put that idea. Or maybe you've just got a sort of sketchy outline of a story. You can use your notebook as a way of developing that idea, kind of trying out different routes, trying out different pathways for your characters to go, or something like that. It's kind of like a place to experiment with words, but also with pictures too. And I use my notebooks for either doing doodles, things like that, where you kind of, you know how it is when you're doing a doodle, sometimes you see a face or you see an animal or something like that. And that can sometimes just be the start of an idea. Doodles are really useful. And what I can do then is once I've got my doodle, I can take that bit that I really like out of it, and I'll transfer that onto another page of notebook, and I'll start to develop it and shape that character a bit more, give it some more personality. Just keep on developing and drawing it. So it's a kind of, again, it's that kind of experimental development space for you to kind of work on your ideas. Photographs of holidays or postcards, places where you visited, or just nice pictures that you like. You never know when they're going to come in useful, so hang on to them, stick them in your scrapbook. And things like, I've got here like song lyrics or poems, so other people's writing, basically, that you like, that you might like the sound of the words or the way they rhyme or something like that. And it's nice to occasionally look at other people's work, because that can be a jumping point for your own work. So use your scrapbook or your notebook as a storage place for other people's snippets of other people's stuff too, so to act as inspiration. I know some people use like recipes as well. That's a good thing to use. I've got here, this is an old notebook of mine. I can see it's quite thick because of all the things I've stuck into it. It's full of cuttings and photographs and doodles and sketches, all kinds of stuff. So open here, for example, for some reason, I can't remember why, I quite liked that picture of a motorbike that was in the magazine. So I cut that out and stuck that in. There's a photograph there of when I went on holiday to Italy. That's Venice in Italy. So I took a picture and stuck that in. So I really liked the building. I thought maybe that would be a good starting point for the story. And it's surrounded by my doodles. There's a picture of Batman there. I was also into Batman at the time. And on the other pages, there's a picture of a Mexican statue, ancient Mexican statue. There's a film poster there as well, all surrounded by more doodles and stuff. And here, there's a couple of poems that I really liked. So I've actually copied the poem into the book to remind me of it, because I really like the way it sounded and the words. So that's kind of what I use my notebooks for. Other people I know use their books, actually they kind of use it as a starting point. If they've got a new book they're writing, what they do is they'll start a new notebook and they'll devote the whole notebook to developing the ideas of the story or working on the pictures of the story. Rather than having just lots of bits of paper lying around, they put it all in one big notebook. And it's their place to kind of play around with ideas. So if you want to get serious about ideas and writing stories, I recommend you get yourself a nice notebook to write in. Okay. Right, so what happens if you're really bad at getting ideas? Or if you're just stuck for ideas, how do you get your inspiration if you haven't got a notebook or full of stuff, or you just want to, you're just in a, sometimes you just can't think, your brain doesn't work. That happens often with me. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a word game that kind of will use to create a character. So if you've got your piece of paper handy, this is where we're going to use it. So I've got here a list of, I call them jobs, they're not really jobs. Witch, astronaut, spy, toilet cleaner, superhero, monster. Monster's not really a job, is it? But I just like drawing monsters, so I put that in. I'm allowed to cheat my own game. And what we're going to do is going to pick one of those words. If I was at your school, I'll be asking you to shout out. I can't do that, so you're going to have to rely on the hand of randomness. I'm not looking, I promise, I'm not looking. So which one am I going to pick? Which one am I going to pick? Superhero. Okay, everyone likes superheroes. That's good. That's nice, straightforward. We say superhero, remember that, superhero. And on the next page, I've got a list of animals. So again, we do the same thing, random hand, random hand, random hand, random hand, random hand. Dog. Okay, that's nice and easy. Dog, superhero. Okay, Dogman, is it? Any of you read Dogman? That's a great comic. No, so we can't call him Dogman. Anyway, dog, superhero. So that is the starting point for our character, just taking two words and putting them together. So what I'm going to do, just going to swap this out of the way. Put up some new drawing paper. So if you're ready with your pencil and or pen and piece of paper, you don't have to do a dog superhero. If you saw that list, you saw something else you'd rather draw, if you've got your own ideas, let's do that. And I'd love to see what you come up with as well. So do tweet your pictures at me if you do them. So dog superhero, okay. So this is going to be a cartoony dog. This is going to be realistic. So I tend to give my dog very big noses. That's his nose. So that's kind of like a sideways U. And that's his actual nose. That's the bit there. I'm going to colour in quickly. And draw the rest of his head. And sweeping around. It's kind of like a sort of eagle or something like that. So that's his ear, a little triangle there. Nice and easy. And I'm going to give him, there's his little mouth. And I keep it very simple and give him some very simple dot eyes. So can you see that? Yes, I think you can just about see that probably. And he has a few little dots where his whiskers are coming out. I'll give him some eyebrows as well. So he's a superhero, so I think he's a cape. And maybe he's got kind of, I'm not sure I'm going to give him muscles particularly, but there we go. Give him quite a nice broad body with a big fat belt. And he needs a belt to hold up his underpants because his underpants are on show. His legs, the straight lines down, go around his feet. Oops. Drawing sideways isn't always a great idea. So he's got his little superhero pants and boots, and doing a superheroic pose is putting his hands on his hips. So he's wearing some gloves, and his cape's kind of flying a bit in the wind. There we are. Now he needs a name. So I'm going to call him names are really important. They really bring a character to life. I'm going to call him, I don't know, Captain Bones or something like that. That would do, Captain Bones. So I can put him shield on his chest. Captain Bones, how are your drawings doing? Are you doing a drawing? I wonder how your dog superhero is looking. You let me know. So the next thing we need to do is think about a location for him to go in. It could be a desert, it could be underwater, it could be a city, it could be another planet. How about we give him set him on the moon? I like drawing the moon. So Captain Bones, it's the story of Captain Bones on the moon. So Captain Moon, he lives on the moon, I reckon. So I'm going to draw him in his kind of headquarters that's on the moon. So I'm going to do like a table. And there's a big kind of computer screen there. And there's a big flashing red light on the top. And the computer screen saying, alert. So Captain Bones. He's watching the computer screen. And he's looking a little bit worried. Because red alert is not a good thing. That means danger. And outside in the window of his moon base, we can see there's the moon. So there's a bit of landscapes and moon mountains and some craters. We can see coming in a rocket coming in to land. So that is the beginning of our story. Every story needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. So now let's do middle. Rocket has landed. And I'm making this up as I go along here, so I don't quite know how it's going to turn out. The door has opened. And this is Captain Bones's moon headquarters. And some steps, oops, oh, steps coming down. Captain Bones is flying out. To sea. Okay, flapping away. Well, there's no wind and the moon is there, but anyway, flying out to see what's going on. And it's a comic, so we need some speech bubble. Who's this? Captain Bones says. And coming out, we need to have like a villain. We've got a hero, so we need a villain. So there was a cat. There was an astronaut on that list as well. So why didn't I do? That kind of fits, doesn't it? So I'll do a space helmet. And a rather bad looking cat coming out of it is so he's floating out of the rocket. And in his hand, he's got a kind of glowing wand type thing. And he's up to no good. And what's he say? He's saying, I'm Jupiter Cat. The moon is mine. So he's up to no good. He wants to take the moon off Captain Bones. Right. So that's the middle of our story. You see, from a simple idea, we just started off with dog and superhero. And already we've got another character, we've got a whole setting, we've got a whole story set up. And it's sort of a bit of a cliffhanger as well. So what happens next? This is Jupiter Cat, bad guy. Boots. Ooh. And he's using this magical space wand. It's kind of emitting this light, this energy, and he's using it to freeze poor old Captain Bones. Doesn't look very happy at all. So Captain Bones is just frozen mid-air. He's stuck, he can't fly. He's surrounded by this paralysis ray that's coming from Jupiter Cat's wand. He's going, big, whereas Jupiter Cat's going, aha, now you are in my power. oh my goodness, what's going to happen next? I think we've just got time to do an ending. So how does Captain Bones get out of this? I wonder what ideas you'd come up with. I really miss not being in the classroom with you, because they always come up with the best ideas. So I'm going to come up, well, I reckon that Captain Bones is a superhero, right? So he must have superpowers of some kind. What is Captain Bones' superpower? Let's think. Oh, okay. I thought it's something really silly. We'll have a go at this. Okay. Just make it a bit more dog-like in this picture. Because I haven't drawn. He's got a tail. And he's wagging it. And it's such a, because it's a superhero dog tail, it's got its own kind of energy as well. So maybe it's kind of like his own magic wand. Let's go with it, shall we? And what happens is, there it is, this energy. Cancels out Jupiter Cat's wand. And what it actually does, it's not a shrinking ray, it's actually a de-aging ray. So Jupiter Cat is no longer Jupiter Cat, is Jupiter Kitten. Yeah, this is Jupiter Kitten. And Captain Bones is saying, the moon is safe once more. There we go. I'm going to call that the end, but with a question mark. Is it? Where else could you take this? Where else could this go? And that's the great thing about this. You could carry on, because who knows, Jupiter Kitten could bounce back. Maybe the de-aging ray doesn't last very long. So what the idea of that was to show you, we started off with 2 words, dog, superhero, and now we've got this epic adventure that's gone on for several chapters and could go on for further. And this is kind of what they call, in films, they use this technique it's called storyboarding, where they basically make a comic of all the scenes in a film before the film is actually filmed, so that the cameraman knows where his camera has to be in order to shoot the various bits of film. So that's called storyboarding, but it's basically a comic. And you could actually, what I might do if it was me, I might, or if you're somebody who doesn't really like drawing, then that's fine as well. You want to stick to writing, is I'd then take this away and I would kind of write it up. I'd write up each picture and I'd add a bit more detail in about Captain Bones, more about him as a, has he got a family? What are his hobbies? Where does he always live on the moon? How did he get there? Why is he on the moon? And why is Jupiter Cat so interested in the moon anyway? If Jupiter Cat lives on Jupiter. So why, and where does this magical space wand that Jupiter Cat's got, where does that come from? There's so much detail there to fill in, and that's all come from just having 2 words. Okay, so I just put this all together. My little summary. So these are things I was trying to tell you about today. First one is if keep a notebook to store your ideas in. Always keep it to hand, keep it by your bedside. So anything you think of, just stick it straight in your notebook, because you never know, it may come in useful later on. What we did today, we used some word games to help inspiration. There are all kinds of other games you can do as well, but that's kind of the most basic one, just sticking words together. Always start your story, think about the character. So don't just think about how they look, think about their personality, think about hobbies, their likes, dislikes, what do they like to eat, do they have family, that kind of thing. Think about the setting. I didn't do too much about this, but that's a big influence on perhaps on what they're wearing. If you're setting a story in a desert, or if you're setting a story in Antarctica, people are going to be wearing different clothes. It's going to be that's going to have all kinds of influences on the way your story progresses. So think very hard about the setting. As we did in that comic story, we need a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I use comics for that. That's a nice simple way of starting off at any rate. So use comics to help plan your story. And the most important thing right at the bottom, I put it right at the bottom, but it's actually number one, is to have fun with your stories. Don't do anything you don't want to write. Just make sure, because if you draw things, if you're writing stories you're not really interested in, it kind of shows. So it's really important that you enjoy what you're writing about. Okay, that's all I was going to say. I think I'm okay with the time. So I'm going to bring Helen back in, because I think we've got some questions.
I have indeed. I've got some questions sent in from the schools that are watching
Lovely.
today. So we'll start with a question from Cocktail School. How long does it take to write a book from the first idea to buying it in the bookshop?
Oh, that's a very good question. It takes an awful long time, a lot longer than most people think. It took, like with the Chocolate Factory Ghost, it took me a couple of, well, maybe I'll say 3 months to write it, which is quite quick for me. And then it takes probably another year or so before it actually ends up in the shops. And the reason for that is, first of all, it has to be edited. So if you have like a piece of schoolwork, it goes to your teacher. The teacher checks the spelling mistakes and how it's all kind of the grammar and things like that. And I have to go through that same process. So I have a person called an editor who does all that for me. Then they have to find someone to illustrate the book. That's not chosen by me, that's chosen by other people. They have to be given time to draw the pictures, and that usually takes probably a couple of months as well. Then it has to go to that all has to be checked to make sure everything's absolutely just right. And then it has to go off to the printers. So yes, it probably takes end to end. It can take anything up to 2 years. Wow. A long time.
Yeah, it is a long time. A question from Titchmarsh Primary School. How do you feel when you're writing a story? Do you get frustrated or do you feel excited?
Both. That's a quick answer. Yes, sometimes things go really smoothly, and if you're really enjoying the particular scene you're writing, it really kind of flows, and you're writing thousands and thousands of words, and it's all wonderful. And sometimes you wake up and it's just not happening, and sometimes you have to walk away from it and do something else, completely different. I'll do some drawing, or I'll make some comics or something like that, because you do get some moments when you're really, really stuck. So it's yes, it's a bit of a roller coaster, I would say, between the two.
We have a question from Felicity now from Oundle Primary. What encouraged you to become an author illustrator? Because I know you used to do something completely different.
I did. I've had a few jobs, but it's always something I wanted to do. I've always drawn. I think I probably wanted to be an artist first, but I like making stories. But I don't know whether I took it too seriously, because I really liked science. I was good at science at school, and I really enjoyed that. So I kind of decided I would do that first, and I would keep illustration and writing as a hobby. But what happened was I missed it so much. I thought, no, I'm going to bite the bullet, and I'm going to stop doing science, and I'm going to become an author and illustrator. But it started out when I was very young, so right from the word go.
Okay, right, we've got a question from the Foxes class from Warmington School. Mm-hmm. Did you know that the Dundoodle Mysteries would be a series of books when you first started writing, or did it happen after you'd finished the first book?
That's another good question. I think I actually did write it as a standalone book, so a book to be on its own. But when people, the publishers, just started to show an interest, you've got to remember that book selling is a business and people like to make money. And if you get a series and you sell more books, then you get more money. So they were quite keen that I should leave it kind of open at the end so that if people did buy the Chocolate Factory Ghost and they liked it, then I could write more books. And that did seem to be the case. So yes, so I wrote a series. And that seems to be, I think that's the most normal way that books are produced these days for those kind of stories, those kind of adventure stories. Older books tend to be, books for older people tend to be one-offs, but for children, they tend to be series for the most part.
Okay, we've got a question from Laxton Junior School now from Zara. What is your favourite book to read at bedtime, written by a different author?
Oh, Zara, that's a very good question. What am I reading right now? There's a writer called Jonathan Stroud who writes, when I'm talking earlier, I really love ghost stories, and he writes really, really scary ghost stories. There's this series called Lockwood and Co. that are about ghost hunters and their children, because only children in this world that he writes about, only children can see ghosts. So children are employed as ghost hunters. And that's very exciting, very spooky, and that's what I'm reading at the moment.
Right, yes. Okay, another question from Oundle Primary from Boston. Where do you write your books? Do you have a particular place?
I do. I mostly write them right here in this room, but sometimes I write them on trains. Obviously, I haven't been doing that for a while, but I have a little, like a little laptop, tiny little laptop, so I can take it on a train and write stuff on there. I do make use of technology. I actually, when I'm talking about having notebooks and things like that, I tend to use something like an iPad these days, because there are kind of various nice little apps you can use for writing and storing pictures and stories and things like that. So mostly here. I have to have everything. It has to be very quiet. So mostly here, but I can write anywhere really.
Okay, right. Another question from Titchmarsh Primary School. Where do you get your ideas for your characters from? Are they based on anybody you know?
I tend not to. I don't think, based on people, just in case they get upset. I don't want to upset any of my friends who might not like being in a book. So I maybe take parts of their personality, or I listen to what people say. If you sit on the bus or something, on the train or something like that, and listen to people's conversations, people can be quite funny, even when they don't necessarily mean to be. So I kind of steal bits of conversation and personality from various people I pass in the street and things like that. But I tend to keep away. Yes, tend not to put my friends into my books, just in case.
Yeah. Yeah. I have an interesting question from Mrs. Fryatt, who's the librarian at Laxton Junior School. And she says, I'd be interested to know how you came up using names such as Clootie Dumpling, which is a real thing, yes, and then playing with real names for sweets and ice creams, such as Jock Chip, Joe Nut, and Fudge Brownies. She thinks they're very clever and fun. And how did you come up with those?
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. I love, that's one of my favorite things actually, is coming up with names. They really do kind of, they really bring a character to life. So yes, I try and do a bit of wordplay. I try and, obviously, because brownies are actual kind of elf creatures, but they also mean cakes as well. So I try to sort of match the two together, and things like Choc Chip, it kind of sounds a bit like something that might be Norwegian, maybe. So I kind of changed the spelling to make it look like it was Norwegian, and that kind of fit with the story. And yes, like Clootie Dumpling is a real thing, but also Clootie Dumpling is it's a piece of cloth that you steam puddings in. I think that's what it is.
I don't know.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Scottish people will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a cloth that you kind of steam dumplings in. So I think, but it sounds a bit like a name to me. So I do kind of, again, it's like I'm stealing things from places where I've heard them or seen them, and if they sound a bit funny or they look a bit funny, sometimes words can look funny. I'll kind of incorporate that into someone's name.
Right, last question from Warmington. Jampires has become one of our favourite books.
Oh,
Do you
good.
prefer writing by yourself or with another author?
Oh, they're very different experiences. I do like writing by myself, but the thing with that is you do kind of get stuck in your own head sometimes. And what's so good about collaborating with another person is their way they think is completely different from the way you think. So you really kind of bounce ideas off each other. And that's how we started out actually with Jampire. Sarah and I made a comic just like we just did there. She would do one page of the comic and I would have to follow with the next page of the comic. I had no idea what she was going to put, but I would have to carry the story on. So it's kind of consequences. If you've ever played that, it's kind of, you don't know what's going to happen, but you have to kind of think on your feet and come up with an answer, and then they have to follow on after you. And that was a great experience. We got loads of ideas out of that. So that's the really nice thing about working with someone else, is that it opens up your mind a whole new set of ideas, and that's a lot of fun. But it can be quite hard work because sometimes you don't agree. Sometimes you argue over stuff. Whereas if it's just you, you can just kind of quietly carry on. These are great questions.
I was thinking that must be quite tricky with you doing illustrating and writing. I mean, sometimes, have you ever had the occasion where somebody else has been given the job of illustrating your books and you've looked at the illustrations and thought, well, that's not how I envisaged this character to look like?
But yes, you do get, well, it's kind of, but it's in a positive way, I find. Because as an illustrator, I kind of understand what they are going through when they're given a text. They have to think about it. So I sympathize with what they're going through. But what I find is it's so interesting to see how other people see your text, what pictures it conjures in their minds and what they come up with. It's really fascinating. And what's really interesting with Chocolate Factory Ghost was I had thought quite hard about what the kind of baddies look like and things like that, because they're kind of slightly more interesting than the goodies. I thought very hard about that, but I hadn't thought very hard about what Archie and his friends look like. I kind of left that to Claire, and she was so good at it that when I wrote the next couple of books, I actually had her characters in my head and I was writing for her characters. So it can be a very positive experience. I'm sure there's some terrible I'm sure there's some people who really don't like the illustrations that they're landed with, but for me, it's been great, and I love seeing how other people see your world.
Right. I just wanted to let you know something as well, and if everybody watching wants to find out what I'm talking about, you'll have to look at David's website or Twitter in a little while. So basically, I've created one of your spirit animals.
Cool.
Right after this, I'm going to start eating it. So I wish you were here. But maybe next time. So thank you very much,
You're very welcome.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for telling us all about your books and giving us some great ideas for creating stories, keeping a notebook, doing storyboards, remembering what your characters are like. And I hope that all of you in schools can use some of these ideas to create your own stories. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
I'm going to leave you all with details of an exciting event this Saturday with author Steve Cole. So the details will be on your screen if you're interested in watching that. And I'll say goodbye for now and enjoy the rest of World Book Day. Goodbye, everyone.
Happy World Book Day.